be back. I miss Startup Grind. It's so good to be back. So grateful for everybody coming out. Getting a chance to just see people is encouraging, and thanks to the panel too for spending time with us today. So we'll spend some time going through these topics, which I think is interesting and relevant, and things that I'm really excited to have been alongside some of these guys for some of this work, and we'll just kind of get your thoughts on Edge and 5G and AI and how all these conflate together. So before we start, as you heard, my name's Jason. Oh, I feel like I got to twist around a little bit. Sorry. Here we go. So I look after Oracle for Startups, which often people are like, y'all do startups? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So if you want to go in the booth over in the tent, you can meet some of our team and hear a little bit about how we want to come alongside and support you in your growth and access to technology and customers and mentorship and all those kinds of things. So our team, just real quick, we're all around the world, and we care about every stage from somebody rolling off their dorm bed to Series A, B kinds of folks. And so we have a lot of people here that can help you talk about that. And I'm coming to you from, I kind of split my time between Virginia and North Carolina, so don't know if we have any people from the Southeast here, but it is cold. It's cold. That's 45. Like, I got off the plane, I'm like, oh my goodness. So anyway, let me just go ahead and start down. Dogan, if you could just tell us a little bit about, like one or two liner about what you do, and then we'll come on down the panel and
Sure.
explore more.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm Dogan, I'm the CEO of Ouva, and we build a platform to make hospitals more autonomous with AI. If you think about a nurse shift, typical 8 hours, when you come to the hospital, on average you see around 15 different care teams. So they have to figure out why you're there, what has happened to you, and what to do if something goes wrong. And through that, there's a lot of delays and mistakes that happen that may hurt the patient. It may make the job of the nurse or the physician very hard. We create a real-time record using cameras, wearables, and combine that with the health records to make the job of everyone easier and going to hospital more safe.
That's great. I'm excited. I'm a father of a kid with special needs that had to deal with things pre-birth. And so coordination of care is extremely hard, even if you are like halfway know what's going on in the hospital. So it's really cool what you're doing there.
Thanks. Yeah, I have 1 year old, and my experience was pretty crazy too.
Yeah,
so.
right.
Hello everyone, my name is Sindhu Joseph. I'm the CEO and founder of Cognicor. Cognicor is an AI-powered business automation platform, especially focused on the financial services. Within financial services, we really focus on the wealth management and insurance carrier space, like financial advising. So to really make the financial advising life really easy, so that they don't spend time on operational, inefficient, routine, administrative kind of things. Like we all know the experience with Amazon, Uber, Netflix, that kind of experience we don't have with financial services when we look at changing beneficiaries or withdrawing from your 401k. So that's not the experience that come to your mind. So our platform is designed to make that experience similar or better. So that's a focus on Cognicor. My own background is in artificial intelligence. I have around a couple of decades of experience in building AI solutions, a PhD, and invented 6 patents in machine learning and natural language processing.
That's great. I feel like I'm breaking the law every time I have to re-up for healthcare. Like I did something wrong. I think the cops are going to come. So that's great. All right. We can.
Amar Kapadia. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Aarna Networks. We are a software company approaching 5G and edge computing from a management plane point of view. So think about zero-touch automation of 5G networks for enterprises and all the associated edge computing applications. That's who we are.
So let's kind of start by defining some of this stuff, because I think we all have in our minds what AI is, what 5G is, and even edge. But maybe for the sake of this discussion, let's tease out what we mean by that here, and then later on we'll kind of look at how y'all apply that to your particular industries, financial services, healthcare, right? So, Dogan, can you like talk to us about edge? Like what's edge compute? What's the edge, and how am I computing on it?
So the smarter the devices closer to the endpoint, nearer to the endpoint, the less data that you have to transfer to the cloud, and the less processing you need to do in the cloud. So since we're coming from a healthcare industry, it means that you can collect really critical information, but then keep the sensitive data by the patient and only send out the data that you absolutely need to do longer term processing in the cloud. That's the initial idea when I think of edge.
Fantastic. So, I mean, you're talking, because we talk about all these sensors that we have out there in the field. I think it's the next level is they're actually doing computation and making decisions at that sensor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, collecting data and then processing that data are kind of two different things. And typically, if you want to cover a big area, you are working with lower cost equipment that can collect that data, but it's not powerful enough to do processing on it.
Okay.
So that's the benefit.
So Amar, then, like, besides what, like, Verizon tells me 5G is, like, to the lay person, it's like, oh, my phone's faster sometimes. You know, what is 5G in the context of what we're talking about here?
So I'll give you a less interesting and technical answer and a more interesting and sort of a business idea. From a technical point of view, 5G is the next version from 4G, and it has much lower latency, higher reliability, higher bandwidth, lower power, software driven. So a lot of technical benefits, but what's really interesting is the outcomes 5G can enable. The first wave will be on the business side. So 4G is typically just a consumer technology. We don't see it in businesses, but 5G will be an enterprise technology where you'll have private 5G just like private Wi-Fi, and it will enable a large number of edge computing applications that Dogan just talked about. And 5G is essentially the most efficient way to get from an endpoint to an edge computing application. So that's, I think, first phase. And the second phase will be for consumers. I don't think anybody is interested in downloading a Netflix movie faster. What 5G will enable is immersion. So 2G was text, 3G was internet, 4G is high-speed video and near real-time applications like Uber. And 5G is going to be complete immersion through AR, VR type technologies.
That makes sense. Although it is good right before the plane takes off, like, oh no, I've got like 5 minutes. I want to get this movie done. So
That's true. That's true.
So Sindhu, I'm going to give you kind of like a two-level question. So like, A, how do these things come together with artificial intelligence? Because that's your, I mean, you mentioned so many patents on this. So how are you seeing those come together in a way that is, and the second part is affecting your industry, like financial services? So that's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah, so the very definition of AI is like, how artificial systems are able to think and act like, humans, and sometimes today it's superhumans. So that is the, very, what is behind artificial intelligence. And one of the key parts of artificial intelligence is machine learning. So we almost equate AI to be machine learning, although, I would say that is not all of it, and I would probably come to that at some point. But machine learning is, relies on a huge amount of data. And that's where I think what is exciting from like, a couple of decades previous and today, if you look at, how the progress of AI has come to be, is because of this data. And that's how I would connect 5G and edge computing to how we can build applications and those kind of immersive experience using AI systems. So the amount of data that 5G can bring, imagine the kind of sensors that you can put in a situation, the context, and that precise information that is brought to AI, and that huge amount of data can be used to build machine learning algorithms much more efficient, much more accurate, to be able to provide you personalized, contextualized information, contextualized decision. So that's That's the beauty of bringing 5G together. In the context of edge, today, especially in financial services, we are looking to go to cloud, and some of them are there in the cloud. But there are also a lot of questions about security and how things would happen in the cloud and so on. So edge computing brings all of those to maybe one level down, because you are processing. If you are able to process, have an AI chip in your device, then all of this makes very interesting in terms of reducing latency, but at the same time providing all of this experience in the edge without sending it to the cloud. So that is the other experience that AI can bring to the edge devices using this 5G data, as well as the edge computing. So we are very excited with the Intel processors and NVIDIA processors and all that coming out with AI chips, and I think that's exciting to look forward to.
How are you guys, so thank you for that, how are you guys applying these ideas within financial services, specifically what you're doing?
Yeah, so while financial services are one of the early adopters of AI solutions, I would say still edge computing and 5G and all that is still emerging. So we are still looking to kind of I would say hybrid in cloud, hybrid in physical servers. So it's still there, but I think more in the fintech space, which is not what we are working on personally. But I think in the fintech space, there is a lot of interesting applications that are brought on, especially in the payment space. You can really have every information processed. For example, as you walk in, your face is detected, processed, and authenticated. Everything happening at the edge. You don't even have to bring that. So that is one very simple application. So from there to robo-advising, all of those, imagine that is happening. I don't know if that would ever happen at the edge, but you can imagine that at some day, that could also happen.
Well, we have time for your big predictions in a minute. But that, I'm not going to jump ahead, but you've hinted at a question I'm going to ask in a minute, which is ethical AI. And I think you all have experience with this, or at least thought about this before we, you have the image of when Elon talks about robots killing us all or something like that. So, I want to bring that out in a second, but before I do, Dogan and Amar, can you talk to us about your application in this? So you mentioned some of that in the hospitals, helping make nurse and community, so what kinds of things are you doing there on the edge?
Well, it kind of comes down to what Sindhu said about latency. So there are a lot of applications in healthcare where you have to respond in minutes, if not seconds. So sending that data to the cloud and processing that and returning typically takes long.
Right.
So an example would be a patient fall. You want to know before the patient gets out of the bed, and a typical camera cannot do that, but a camera bundled with a good AI processor can provide that information. But then if you think about, let's say running an analysis on in which departments you have the most falls, that's something that you don't have to do as often. So that something like that can happen in the cloud. Another case is from the patient side. When you come into the hospital, you're thinking about self-service, you don't want to, it's kind of you don't want to cancel your internet subscription by going on the phone and talking to someone for an hour. It's the same expectation when you come to hospital. You don't want to track down someone to figure out where to go, where you need to be. All that information is there. So these edge devices like your phone, some smart sign can activate that information for you and send you to your destination quickly.
That's great.
So those are some applications there.
One of the things I think is really neat about this is it's leveling the playing field for creation, because I think a few years ago, some of this, yes, you can do, but you needed an extreme high amount of capital to put devices in the field. Now you can leverage devices people already have. I mean, obviously you can make some specialized stuff, like I'm wearing a Whoop device right here, but a lot of this is there. And so this connection of speed and data with these other folks. I just feel like it enables creation better. So talk to me about your application of this in your networks, because you guys are in it.
So our play is horizontal, but I'll choose Industry 4.0 or manufacturing to sort of highlight the combination of edge, 5G, and AI. So the applications that we are seeing first are related to computer vision. So you can have a set of cameras in a factory. You don't want to send it up all to the cloud. So over 5G, you send it to an edge site. And you could be doing worker safety. So if somebody is on a ladder and it goes above the rung, you want, an alert goes to the foreman. It could be for assembly line inspection, where you miss a step and again somebody gets alerted. It could be just for security, right? If somebody is in an area they shouldn't be in, you flag it. So computer vision is one. Augmented reality is expected to play a big role in factories, where you could see a worker wearing these smart goggles, and an expert, if they need help, an expert shows up and starts pointing out, say, click here or unscrew this, so on and so forth. And then you can have, and that requires low latency. And then you can have other advanced applications ranging from IoT, drones flying around, which need, again, low latency, autonomous robots, which need low latency and AI. So hopefully you got a flavor of how these three technologies will really revolutionize manufacturing in the next few years.
So, when you talk about facial, computer vision, it makes me think about, ethical AI. I remember working on, I'm former financial services too. I was a part of the IPO at Capital One years and years ago. And I remember working on some projects where we looked at making, in a particular industry that they were applying credit scores to, how do we make it easier to predict creditworthiness and propensity to pay, which are two different things. Creditworthiness is, do you got money? Propensity to pay, are you going to pay me, right? And right now you've got this way that you have to pull a credit file. It might be good, might be bad. Other countries don't have that infrastructure. Can we look at a face and make that determination? Short answer is yes. Is it ethical? Probably not. So what are the kind of things that you guys are seeing? Let's talk about healthcare for a moment and financial service. All of you, I would love to see your thoughts on that, because we run faster than policy can ever keep up. It's always going to be that way. So we're a relatively self-guided group of people, which is good and sometimes bad. So how are you thinking about this, and how have you, maybe you haven't encountered it yet, but what is your thoughts on ethical AI?
I just wrote about this. We actually published our data sources and analyzed it for their diversity to be more transparent about it.
Right.
We found that there are two parts to it. One is the AI models, which kind of you hinted on, something as straightforward as if you train a model on a population which has lighter skin, it will not necessarily
Correct.
perform equitably on in a different population. So that's one level, but then it also goes a little deeper than that. A lot of startups, if you have a lot of data, you're hiring data annotators, which actually we found that two different people from two different cultures will not label a person's skin color the same. So then you're actually thinking about your workforce and who are the people that you're working with. What kind of backgrounds do they come from? Is there enough multidisciplinary variation within your team to give voices to everybody equitably? So that's kind of the one area that we see in healthcare. And then the second one is the ethics of the application. So you think that you might be building a product that is going to help nurses and physicians, but you may end up with something that turns a hospital into like an Orwellian 1984, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want that either. So you actually have to build it with the buy-in from the people that are going to be using it from the beginning. So we actually built our solution in a hospital by working with a hospital specifically for over 2 years. So I feel like that's the only way if you can do it. Just get the buy-in early and hear their concerns and build it into your product.
That's good. Sindhu, what are things that you're seeing in this space? I mean, you've been looking at this for so long.
Yeah.
How do you think about this? And maybe even some examples that you guys see coming or have had to deal with.
Yeah, so maybe I should talk a little bit general in this because I come more from an AI background than from a financial services background. So as I have been always kind of focused on ethical AI, and one of the things that I came to realize is as a society we are biased. You cannot take away the fact that any group of people you take, we have a bias. So what AI is doing is basically permanencing this historical bias that humans have, and not only permanencing but amplifying this bias, because once you have built this bias into AI algorithms, it spreads and it amplifies. So these are the two things that when we are developing AI solutions, we should be really careful about, how without when humans are making decisions, you can always theoretically at least change those decisions. You have different group of people, you try to kind of have that mixture. But once it is in the control of AI, which is what more and more we are seeing, every walk of life, without our own understanding, AI is making decisions for us. And in that context, AI is permanenting these decisions, and that's where I think we should be very focused on. So in terms of, and this goes again to the core of how AI algorithms are built using data, huge amount of data. And these data are unfortunately historical. So if you take a look at a hiring position, or even I would jokingly say that if you are going to predict the next US president, so you have certain historical data that you are going to train it on, and then you would never predict somebody who is not from that population, which doesn't mean that that person is not qualified, but just that you don't have that data. Now look at any type of hiring. If you're hiring a software engineer, you would probably typically hire somebody who is from a Asian descent, male, 35 years old, just because that is kind of the most popular category, not because others are not qualified. So I think one is when we use historical data, how do we kind of use it? Can we use synthetic data to complement that? So that's data creation is one huge place where we should look at. The second is the algorithms itself. This is where I was hinting at the very beginning. AI is most often today is equated to machine learning, which is learning from huge amount of data. But if you look at human kind of thinking, we do learn from historical data, huge amount of examples how a child learns. But we also learn from or reason using kind of general theories, kind of a top-down reasoning. If I say, Jason, you cannot fly because you are a human and humans don't fly. It is not based on huge amount of data. So I think you have to build AI systems that are explainable, and so using different types of AI techniques. We just don't look at only machine learning technologies. So using those two things, I think we can build more explainable, more unbiased data and unbiased systems that have AI applications.
Yeah, go ahead.
I really agree with the synthetic data portion too. Yeah. We are heavily investing into that, and that's balanced a lot of our data in terms of.
Can you define synthetic
right.
data a little bit?
It's for us, if you're thinking of a computer vision type of application, you're creating lifelike, realistic looking images that the machine learning models can learn from. And they may take to generate anywhere from few hours to few days, as opposed to when we're working with hospitals to get data from consented patients, it may take months, if not a year. So that's a very, that we'll be hearing that more and more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A here. So this is kind of like the prediction piece. So Amar, I'm going to start with you. I was thinking of like a 5-year timeline, but that's like 1,000 years in the edge world. Like, what are some of the things that are going to impact, maybe even manufacturing, or because of edge? Like, where do you see things going? And I love prediction questions because, like, nobody's going to come back and check on you.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So I think the promise of 5G edge computing and AI, I think, is B2B and B2C. On B2B, it's just helping, for example, if manufacturing, you get 20% more efficiency, that's a massive number. And that's the promise of these technologies through the examples I gave. Maybe I'll touch upon B2C, which I didn't talk about more. So I hinted that from 2G to 4G, we have gone from text to web to high-speed video. I think 5G is going to be all about immersion, specifically AR and VR. And I think right now those technologies are super hyped up, and even Facebook has changed their entire name to the metaverse. But I think there's some reality there. And as consumers, whether it's education, whether it's gaming, whether it's video conferencing and child meeting the grandma across the world, I think these things are going to be completely touched by immersive experiences. And that's what I look forward to with the confluence of these technologies.
That's great. Sindhu, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I don't go to big predictions. I think some practical predictions in financial services, because we are still kind of decades behind other services, and I think the huge change that is going to come about is customer experience, both in financial services as well as in insurance, in providing that personalized predictive experience for customers. Imagine as you are planning a vacation and you are starting to arrive, or the previous day, like you get a message from your insurance provider saying that this tomorrow the weather prediction, or something happened at that place, which makes it you better not go, or things like that. So providing that assistance, decision making guidance proactively for users, so that you don't get into an accident maybe 2 hours down the line, or things like that. So if you can provide those kind of engaged experience from an insurance provider, I think that is where you would have much more, you don't have to, both insurance companies would be much more profitable, but at the same time, I think we would have a great experience as a customer. So the same thing with financial services, how you interact with, like if you are going to buy something, like looking at your overall wealth, overall finance, like I'm going to buy a next generation of Apple mobile, and then suddenly somebody is telling me, okay, look at your finance, and do you have to really buy this today, or things like that. So in terms of we even in the US, we are very bad at kind of planning our financial future. So if all of these technologies can help us plan better, understand our holistic wealth, and I think that's where the next generation of these technologies will enable us to.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dogan, how about in this space with medical? Like I think about so many things. Even when you're talking about the falls, like are you even seeing a world where like it would, based on movement, you'd predict this person's going to fall, let's prevent it?
Absolutely.
Besides,
I mean that's what we do right now.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what is going to be changing more and more is that going to a hospital will feel similar to going to a hotel. In that you don't have someone coming and knocking on your door every 1 or 2 hours, unless they absolutely have to. So there will be more space for resting, more space for healing, less interruptions. Today, even if you think of like a radiologist might be reviewing your X-rays from their bed on their laptop at their home.
Right.
So more and more the care providers will be in remote locations, and you will be in places more geared towards actually healing, and not as much as like depending on the technology and the presence of caregivers there.
That's really cool.
At home too as well.
I love that. Well, we've got a few minutes left, or no, we don't?
We do not, unfortunately, have time for this
awesome.
exciting panel take questions.
That's awesome. All right, well.
However, we do have time for a big round of applause.
Thank you for coming, guys. I appreciate it.